welcome. I'm Dr. Joe Mather, and I'm here with Ariel Baker. And she was happy enough to come on and share her story with me. We've been working together for a little bit. And Ariel, welcome. Thank you.
Thank you for having me.
Well, we had a conversation in our last appointment about how easy it is to just feel like there's only bad news. There's only horrible things in politics and health, and you go online and you just hear horror stories of people not getting better. And happily, you are not one of those people. And so we wanted to share some good news. So maybe you can just start out by giving people kind of a background of your journey to get well. You were sick for 19 years, and maybe you can just give people a snapshot of what that's like.
Yeah. So I had mold exposure when I was 23. I lived at a field camp and I thought that I was so baller to live down there. And then the consequences were drastic. Right. And so from 26 to 40, 41, I walked with a cane. And I got a bunch of misdiagnoses and I got treated for some things that were wrong. And I
Yeah.
felt really bad. And I kept getting worse and worse and worse. And when I was in my late 30s, I lived on a tropical island, also probably in a moldy house. And they were like, you have to go back. Like, we can't treat you out here. Like,
Yeah.
you got to. And so I moved to Massachusetts where everybody has some sort of tick-borne illness. And
Right.
got, well, first I had a weird round in an emergency room. And they were like, maybe you have syphilis. And I was like, what if it's 1835? No. And so anyway, I got tapped into a doctor who was like, "Oh, you have a tick-borne illness and mold." And so we tried a bunch of things, and it got real gnarly. Like I had some seizures, and like my arm had a tremor, and like my face
Yeah.
drooped. And but we tried an herbal protocol, and we tried some antibiotics, and half of what I had, this tick-borne illness, got better. And I want to emphasize that because it was really amazing, and I was able to stop wearing my sunglasses all the time, and I could hear more noise,
Yeah.
and that was great. Like, that was a big improvement right there, and I still walk with my cane, and I would go so then I moved to Arkansas, and when we were looking for apartments, if I walked into a place that was moldy, I would, like, immediately get, like, nauseous, and my head would hurt, and, like, a few
Yeah.
times I fell, and so it was terrible, and I was like, "Well, I'm really not better," and the doctor there had Massachusetts retired and referred me to Joe Mather, and I think I've been seeing him for about 2 years. And I had mast cell and I had SIBO for a while. And so at this point, I was kind of winging it because, 20 years, you kind of feel like you know what you're doing. So I took a round of
Yeah.
SIBO medicine that did not
Yeah.
help.
Oh, yeah. 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 We'll talk about that.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. And then
Yeah.
Joe was like, let's really focus on your mast cells. And that made all the difference, like
Oh,
all
yeah.
the difference. And I went on a pretty intense, like low histamine diet and gave up all my favorite foods, tomatoes and avocados. And I was already off bread and sugar, kinda.
Yeah.
And so anyway, I stuck to that and I started feeling really better. And then we kept on, and then we added Cromolyn, and we added like I changed my exercise routine. And now I'm in the best health of my life ever. Like
And
since I'm 23 years old.
that,
Amazing.
that's
Yeah.
that's what healing looks like, and that's why I'm so excited for you to share your story because you have some of the greatest hits of fighting your battles in the integrative and functional medicine world. Something you said. Let's give people some context. When you say field camp, I think one of the underlying triggers was chemical and oil exposure. I think you were doing an oil cleanup. Do I have that right?
So I did a slew of things that probably triggered me. So I lived south of New Orleans on an island in a building that was there since 1950 or something crazy. And this was in the early 2000s.
Oh yeah. Yep.
And then I lived in Baton Rouge in like a terrible apartment by a terrible landlord that had a hole in the roof and like an air conditioner leak for 2 years. And that
Ugh.
building, by the time I left that building, I couldn't eat pizza. I like had a headache every single day. I couldn't see light. I couldn't hear noise. And so that building really, really was lonely. And
Classic symptoms for mold. So people listen. That's what we see a lot. Uh,
oh,
Yeah.
yes. Nobody knew. I went to all kinds of people. Nobody knew. And they would
Sure.
be like, could you do this physical therapy thing? And I was like, in my 20s. And I was like, yeah, I can run a mile. No big deal.
Yeah.
And they were like, you're fine then. I was like, I'm not. But then I worked on the oil spill, the Deepwater Horizon oil spill cleanup, and so that was exposure, and I worked on fishing boats, and, like, we would catch these fish in Texas that had, like they were deformed, and then maybe we would eat them, and so that was probably terrible, and then I lived in the tropics, and, they had a hurricane, and everything got sort of wiped, but my building, was a concrete bunker, so they just wiped it down and, like, kept the
Yeah.
mattress and everything. So I got a lot of exposure. And then now I work for FEMA and I regularly go to disasters that are moldy.
Yeah. So maybe one of the big points that I hope people take away who are struggling with their health is that people kind of want to have one thing. It's I'm sick because of Bartonella. I'm sick because of mold. But almost always when you peel back, we see multiple triggers that are probably contributing to someone's sensitivity, just making someone's mast cells all pissed off, right? So we've got chemical exposure, we have chronic infections, right? We probably have plastic exposures. We definitely have some mold, and all of that kind of, I think, we're important to take care of. So let's jump forward to maybe one of the things that I see often in patients like you, and that's seeing maybe a doctor who is well-meaning, but thinks that the way to get patients like you to health is to kind of force through something. And I think you had a pretty negative reaction when a doctor identified SIBO and then prescribed you some antibiotics. Am I remembering that correctly, Ariel?
So I had a really negative reaction when I knew that I had SIBO and a doctor instead prescribed me an antidepressant. So that was my most negative reaction. But
Yeah.
then I took SIBO. I had an antibiotic for SIBO round one, and it helped a lot. I did gain weight, but my stomach started hurting. But then I gave myself maybe like 8 months later a second round of SIBO antibiotics. And then I had a really negative reaction, most likely because I didn't have SIBO then. And I just felt like I did. And because I had no longer, like, that doctor had retired. And so I was like, well, my stomach is still hurting. And I had SIBO before. So this seems like a good idea. And it turns out that's not what it was. But I will say that I did have negative reactions for pushing to a lot of the detox methods, and I'm extra sensitive to stuff. So often people will say, take a whole, and now I never take a whole. But, I didn't know at the beginning, and the doctor that I was working with didn't either, right? And so sometimes I would be like, this is really hard. And then he would be like, well, just try some more or whatever. And then after a couple of years of working together, he'd be like, back off. But
Okay.
it
Yeah.
took a while for us to like both get a rhythm about what I could and could not tolerate. And the truth is I can't tolerate much. Um, yeah.
But that's okay, because when you find the right things, you really taken leaps and bounds forward, and you're not alone in that, being sensitive to very small amounts of medications. And I can't tell you, I mean, it's on every single clinic. I have a patient come in and they say some version of my doctors think I'm crazy because I only can take a quarter dose of the antidepressant. Or if I take more than a half dose of the blood pressure medicine, my blood pressure drops. Or every single time I tried that herb or that antibiotic, is way too much for me. And this is par for the course in people who have toxic exposures of all kind, and especially when they have mast cell activation syndrome, which you did. And this is a clinical diagnosis that I think goes under the radar still. And t- t- let's talk about mast cell for a bit. What does that mean to you? And help and let's talk about your experience of going through that.
Yeah. So at the end, after I was much, much better from all the other things, then I was like, somebody, probably a doctor, was like, I think you have mast cell. But we didn't explore it too much, right? So then
Yeah.
I read, like, I bought Larry Afrin's book and read it.
Mhm.
And I, like, scoured the internet like one does because, in all this, the internet was a tool that I found really helpful, even though, like, I'm not a doctor.
Yes,
And obviously, like, you know way more than me. And I'm so glad I found you. But you also have to be your own advocate sometimes, right?
you do. You do.
And so I was mostly better except for the mass health stuff. So, like, my sister's girlfriend is a farmer. So 2 summers ago, she gave me all these tomatoes, and I ate 'em, and it was amazing, but it was like, I don't know, like a gallon of tomatoes I ate or something crazy. And then I thought I was gonna die. Like, I mean, I felt so bad, and I've been feeling reasonably good. And then my back hurt, and I think I was nauseous, and, my head hurt. I laid in bed for 3 days after I ate those tomatoes. I didn't go to work. It was terrible. And so right around that time, I think I was coming to you, and I told you that story, and you were like, "Oh, mast cells. Tried an antihistamine diet." And so I did,
Mhm.
and it made a huge difference. And all that summer, as part of this mast cell stuff, even on the antihistamine diet, I still, would take a Benadryl because you told me it's antihistamine. I would, take, a child's Benadryl in the evening and,
Yep.
pass out, but be able to sleep and also not have to take, the hardcore rescue medicine that I had, right? And
Yeah.
so that's, a subtle change, but as I, slowly also, let me just say, I've taken quercetin for years,
Yep.
and I think you're exactly right that some of the detox methods I were taking were, keeping my mast cells active,
Yes, they
because
were.
prior to this, I would take a charcoal at lunch or, when I was on an empty stomach, and then I would get a headache, 20 minutes later, every day, every day, every day. And so when I started seeing you were like, "Stop all that." And oh my gosh, Joe, my headaches went away. And I had known before this, I've had a headache every day of my life from the time I was 23, and sometimes a debilitating headache, right? And then when
Mhm.
you were like, "What, taking those binders?" It completely changed my lived existence, my life in practice. So thank you. Thank you.
It's so funny because I begged some patients to get on binders, and I just formulated a binder with Moss Nutrition. So it's not that binders are bad in all cases, and there probably was a time where that was really helpful. But I think our job as healers is to always be asking, is this what my patient needs right now, or is it not? And it was really clear. I just pull up your note, and we started working together in August of last year, and I got you right on that low histamine diet and wanted you to pull back from some of those pieces. And the nice thing was that you responded quickly. And so, from my perspective, when I give a treatment recommendation and the patient does it and they start feeling better quickly, you're on the right path. And you were one of those great cases where we kind of figured out what was needed real quick, and then you just kind of took off. Um, I know you wrote that the pressure was released. You were taking deep breaths. It felt amazing. And I had you do some hernia work. Um, and just taking the break from the detox supplements made you move forward. You did great until you had another mold exposure. I think you were at Arkansas in that time in a moldy field office with FEMA. Is that right?
Yeah, I went to FEMA and it was moldy, and
And
so
the
I
headaches
felt
came back,
so
the fatigue and the achiness kinda just came swinging right back, right?
yeah, right back, and I knew immediately it was the building,
Yep.
and when you were I even was like, "I don't have to come to work, y'all can let me go," and they were like, "No, no, we need you, so please stay," but it was a weird situation, so everybody listen to your coworkers because I would go to the building and feel really bad immediately, and it took me about 3 days to put it together, and then I was like, "Oh, this is the building." But then all of my coworkers also had problems and also made jokes about the toxicity of building, but, none of them took action.
I
But I
know.
was
It's
just
just
like, "Oh, I can't be here." And so,
like
yeah, and so you wrote me a note, and that helped a lot immensely. I still did have to go, but even being on the antihistamine diet and also yeah, and it made it better. So when I first got there, we hadn't been following that protocol very long, 6 months-ish. By the time I left, that would have been a full year, and by the time I left, I could go so at first, it would go in the building and be like, "Headache, nausea, fatigue," and then by the end of it, in the middle, I would go in the building and, my throat would get all itchy. It
yep,
was
yep.
terrible. But then by the end, I could go and I could be there for 2 days, and I would only be tired. So,
And I
even with that
there's a couple of reasons for that, and I just gotta stop and say that so what you saw, Ariel, was something that is apparently impossible if you listen to some mold podcasts and mold experts, is that you cannot make any progress while being exposed to mold, is that any mold will set you back. You need zero exposure to heal. That's just not correct. It's just cases like yours. People need to realize that if you're doing the right things, you can get better, even if there's a little mold exposure, or in this case, a lot of mold exposure. And it wasn't a super complicated program that let you move forward. It was doing due diligence on a low histamine diet, right? Not being perfect on it, but doing a good job. You were doing a probiotic protocol that I had, and we took some tweaking of the dose, I think up and down a little bit. And then the thing that really moved the needle for you to make you feel better day after day and make progress was the medication Cromolyn. And that, from my perspective, was, I think, when you took a really big step. And it's one of the reasons I really love using that medication in patients like you, because you often will just find that everything calms down so that people can start making progress. It's like the cellular mechanics, like all like take a deep breath, and everybody kind of relaxes and just starts chipping in to make you feel better. Let's talk about Cromolyn and what that was like and how you dosed it, and tell people about the medication Cromolyn.
I love Cromolyn. Oh my gosh. I think that you're exactly right. It made everything so much better. And I had been taking quercetin forever, years at this
Yeah.
point. And Cromolyn was the one exactly that just calmed it down. And
Hmm.
better than, Benadryl or better than anything.
Yep.
And and it I feel it in my stomach when I take it. And after I eat forever, even water made my stomach hurt. And
Yep.
so bromelain has made most of that, not all of it yet, but most of it go away.
Yep.
And you're supposed to take it before you eat, 30 minutes before you eat, but I'm a sporadic eater and a grazer. So I
Sure.
just take it 4 times a day. I take it when I wake up,
Hmm.
and I take it around the lunch hour, and I take it around the dinner hour, the normal people 6 o'clock dinner hour. And then I take it at midnight when I go to bed. And yeah, so that's it. That's how I take it. And I eat in between those times. And it's helping. I do take for mast cells Pepsid and Allegra,
Yep.
which I do take those.
I
And
have
those,
most of my mast cell patients are on Pepsid and Allegra or Claritin. They make a big difference too.
yeah. And I think the thing about Cromolyn and the Pepsid and Allegra is they block different kinds of mast cells, right? So it's a cocktail.
Yeah.
And truly, the Cromolyn has just made everything better. And, when you think about it, like diet changes and Cromolyn changes, like it's all in my stomach and I didn't know.
Yep.
And like 15 years ago at this point, somebody was like, oh, yeah, you have some stomach issues, blah, blah, blah. And like nobody ever addressed them. And this has helped everything. Like,
Yeah.
I can't say it enough. I feel so dramatic, but like it's totally true.
But that's what you're looking for in functional medicine. When you treat the right cause, people get better. And people sometimes have the idea that integrative medicine, that prescriptions are bad, right? That you can only use quercetin and resveratrol and vitamin C and a diet. But what you needed was a little bit of everything, right? You needed the diet, you needed the probiotics, you needed the Allegra, the Pepsid, and then the Cromolyn was just the icing on top that really helped you move forward. It's like a lock and a key. For you, that was the piece that really opened things up, right? And
Yeah.
so not long after that, you wrote me this. You said, just a quick check-in. I've been taking Cromolyn 3 to 4 times a day. It's made a huge difference. I was already feeling good mostly, but with the Cromolyn, I basically don't have any symptoms. I don't have a sore throat or fatigue or muscle aches. Instead, what I do have is an undercurrent of energy that lasts through the day. So this is not a Cromolyn commercial, right? I don't make money by prescribing Cromolyn, but it's the sort of really substantial improvement that when you're giving the right treatment, you'll want to see, because then you can take that undercurrent of energy and put it back into yourself and fix and fix the things that you haven't been able to take care of when you've been sick for, in your case, 15 years. And so when you, maybe we can spend a little bit of time, because Cromolyn, I don't think is the only thing that helped. We recently also, I put you on some iron, and I think that's been another piece that's really easy to overlook. And I think it's made a big difference. Do you agree, or do you think I'm off base on that one?
Oh, no, I definitely agree. Can we go back for just a second though?
You're in
For
charge.
all for all the sick people that are out there, I want to talk to you about this little current of energy because that was probably in May and this is October, so not even 6 months. And
Yeah.
I forgot about that. And because what happens, right, is when you are sick, you forget that you can feel good. And then when you feel good, you kind of forget what it's like to feel that all the time.
I
And so
know.
now this needs to have an energy. Like I don't have to take a nap in the middle of the day. And like until you said that, I mean, I know like, oh, I used to have to take a nap in the middle of the day, like every
Yeah.
day to get through the day. And like now I don't. And I almost don't even think about it
Yeah.
anymore, which is amazing. Like really like life changing, but sort of when your life changes, you can forget. So
It's
I just
so
wanted
easy.
to,
And
yeah.
I'll share one of my doctor secrets, is that whenever a patient sends me something like that, I copy and paste it into the chart. And then because there's almost always a time where 6 months will go by and the patient's so clearly doing better, but they don't perceive that they're better. And so I'm like, let's wind the tape back. This is where you were. This is where you are now. And they're like, oh yeah, wait, I am getting better, because there are cases like yours where you find the right combination and then boom, you get better. But there are other cases where it's a 5% bump every month. And then maybe you have a setback and then it's another bump. It's slow and steady. And those patients in particular, you got to kind of help them understand that it's slow and steady progress is still progress. And so when you're playing the long game, it might be worthwhile if you're a practitioner saving some of those messages from your patients. Uh, yeah, so that was May, and then we just had another visit within the last week, and you had taken yet another step forward. I think your hair started thickening, growing back, and for my female patients, like it's almost like you could have everything else being horrible, but when you get the hair better, then they think you're a good doctor.
Yeah. So I started taking iron in June after our May
Yeah,
visit, and my hair started growing back because my hair was falling out in clumps, and that was terrible. And so I am so, so excited about that. But the other thing is that I was having muscle aches last winter, pretty serious muscle aches. So like made it hard to like exercise or whatever, but also just felt achy. And
yeah,
I started taking that iron and then I don't have those muscle aches anymore. And that I
yeah.
think also contributed to me being like, I feel amazing. It's one wind that let me go outside. Right. I mean, I was going outside before and like taking
Yeah.
these miles. But
Mhm.
now, like, I went and camped out last week. Like I hike around. And so I probably walk 2 to 4 miles a day
Love it.
and, yeah, and, like, it's just easier because I have energy and oxygen and my muscles don't hurt. And so that and also, let's not forget, it was my cane of almost 20 years. I don't have that. And so, yeah, here we are.
That's all. It's all music to my ears, my friend. I absolutely love hearing that. Maybe another benefit of healing is the fact that you don't need some of the medications that you were reliant on. I think that's a huge win, and that always makes my day when I can take medications off of someone's list. I think that's pretty great. You had a wonderful trip to New York City, where I think you got to live a little. Y- you're feeling. You told me the best you felt in your adult life, and so that I think is the most important thing. Is that things aren't perfect, but you're back to your life, right? You're back to doing the things you like. You're active. You've got your symptoms way down. Is there anything you want to share with people who are struggling to get better? Maybe anything you would say to yourself 15 years ago,
Yeah, or 5 years ago.
five.
It's gonna be you're gonna be fine, but it's gonna suck getting there.
I love that. Yeah, life is hard, right? And functional medicine, I think, sometimes overpromises in that you have doctors kind of promising the moon and the world about if you take this supplement or this lab will fix everything, and it takes work, right? It's not immediate, but what a good doctor should be doing is finding the things that are making you move forward and then doubling down on that and just trying to simplify everything else, getting everything else out of the way to just try to clear as many hurdles for your patient as possible. And And it's just been such a pleasure to work with you and just see you charge forward into your life. It's just great. It's just great.
Thank you for making me better.
Yeah, you know, the fun part about being a doctor is that I just get to tell people what to do, right? You actually had to do the work of the low FODMAP diet and eating all my probiotics and you know, putting up with my bad jokes and everything. Um, you know, looking back through your notes here, is there anything that you feel like we didn't do justice talking about? Anything you want to share with someone who's sick?
Diet. I mean, I really can't emphasize enough how changing, like, not like diet's a cure all. It's not a cure all, but this low
Right.
histamine diet, like, it was hard, right? And it's mentally taxing to have to change like everything that you eat and give up all the stuff you love. But it made such a difference. And like no regular doctor is ever going to talk to you about that.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
thank you for that. Because I mean, truly, like even at the beginning of this years and when I was in my 20s, like I knew like freshetta pizzas were hurting me. So I stopped
Yep.
eating freshettas and switched to DiGiorno's, but that was not actually the correct answer. And so this low histamine diet, whenever I ate all those tomatoes, or like a couple weeks ago, I got carried away on fruit, and I know the difference. But if you hadn't talked to me about a low histamine diet, I wouldn't have known what to do. Right.
Yeah.
Um,
Yeah. Do you mind if I just talk a little bit about the low histamine diet? Because
Ooh.
you're a case study for someone who it was very clear that to giving this a try was probably going to help, but it's not for everybody. You had a very classic symptoms of mast cell. You would drink water and you'd have symptoms. Randomly, you'd eat and have symptoms. You had all of these toxic exposures. You felt better when we gave you some of the mast cell support. And so you had all this lines of evidence suggesting that a low histamine diet would help. And so that's why I wanted you to try that. And what I typically do, hopefully I did a good job, is that I asked people to give it a like 2, maybe 3-week trial period. Give it your best shot without being perfect. Are your symptoms going down very clearly? Because if you're like, maybe sort of, they're not. You wrote about the low histamine diet. It's helping. It's helped everything. It changed everything. I have less muscle pain, less aches, better energy, less fogginess. That's the sort of thing you're looking for to say, okay, this intervention is working. Because if you put someone on a low histamine diet, which is it's hard, it's restrictive, right? And if someone's not getting better, you don't want them to keep going on the diet, right? You want to stop and you want to let them do something easier, because I see too many patients who've seen a variety of doctors and they come in with an eating disorder because they've done the low histamine diet and they've followed the silliness about lectins, and they've followed all these things that are just too restrictive, and it has made them worse. And so you really just have to step back and be as objective as you can. If it's helping, great. You continue doing it for as long as it's helpful, understanding that the healthier you get, the more histamine you're going to be able to eat without having a problem. And so that's just my soapbox about diets. I love low histamine for the right patient. It's not for everybody, but when it works, heck yeah, right? You got to give
yeah.
it awesome. Well, this has been super wonderful. I really hope this brings a smile to some people's faces and gives them a little bit of hope that they can get better, because you are walking, talking proof of that. Thank you for sharing your story. This is just great. And I know it's gonna matter a lot to a lot of people who are hurt. So thank you.
Thank you.